Tres preguntas y una conversación complicada. Entrevista con William Pinar. William Pinar es uno de los más importantes autores en el campo del currículo. Él ha sido líder en tres de los principales movimientos teóricos en el campo de los estudios curriculares desde los años 70. Es un autor importante cuyos trabajos son fundamentales en el movimiento de la reconceptualización curricular, en la etapa de la post-reconceptualización y actualmente en lo que él mismo ha denominado la fase de internacionalización y cosmopolitanismo en el campo del currículo. Es realmente un honor que un autor con esta trayectoria nos esté acompañando el día de hoy. El doctor Pinar actualmente es profesor del Departamento de Currículum y Pedagogía en la Universidad de British Columbia y ha sido reconocido como un eminente investigador por el gobierno de Canadá. Previamente también fue un destacado profesor e investigador en el campo de la teoría curricular en Louisiana State University. Su producción curricular y los trabajos que ha hecho sobre el campo, bueno, son muy meritorios, son muchísimos, más de 40 libros, docenas de artículos, pero probablemente lo más importante es que él ha publicado los trabajos que marcan verdaderos hitos históricos en el campo del currículum y que tienen una trascendencia en muchos países, no solo de habla inglesa, de habla hispana, sino en varios continentes. Aquí simplemente un recorrido por algunos de sus libros más destacados, comprendiendo el currículum, que es la teoría curricular, los dos interesantísimos volúmenes que él publicó, el Handbook Internacional de la Investigación en el campo del currículum, donde invita a pues destacados académicos de más de 25 países con una década de distancia para plantear cuál es el estado de la cuestión de los estudios curriculares, de las reformas, de las teorías en sus respectivos países. El doctor Pinar, pues ha tenido recientemente una gran trascendencia, y digo recientemente porque su obra no había sido publicada en español, se había difundido más bien en habla inglesa, pero su interés en los estudios en el campo del currículum en América Latina y particularmente en México permiten que se publique para el año 2011 como parte de esa serie de estudios internacionales del currículum que él realiza, un texto sobre lo que es las historias intelectuales y lo que es el devenir del currículum en países como México. Esto es para el 2011 y en el 2014 pues con el apoyo del doctor José María García Garduño, que también está presente en esta entrevista, se publica en español la teoría del currículo. A partir de ahí podemos decir que su trabajo va a ser muchísimo más difundido y actualmente de los más citados cuando se habla de este campo. Y particularmente para el año del 2023, él es invitado por la Secretaría de Educación Pública, por algunos de los responsables a cargo, para realizar un análisis crítico sobre lo que es el Plan de Estudios 2022, el de la nueva escuela mexicana, que fue publicado en la revista Perfiles Educativos, como lo pueden ustedes ver en pantalla. Lo que le quisiéramos preguntar es el tema de la autonomía de los profesores frente al currículo. En el artículo que hemos mencionado, él hace una importante crítica a lo que es el concepto de codiseño y considera que en realidad es una libertad muy relativa en el plano de lo que es conceder al profesor pues la oportunidad de definir el aspecto didáctico en el aula, pero esto no es la solución desde su punto de vista a la autonomía del docente, porque la pregunta canónica del currículum para él, que es qué enseñar, es decir, cuáles son, cómo se definen los contenidos básicos del currículum, por su relevancia, por ser los más importantes en los procesos formativos, no es una respuesta que esté en manos del profesorado. Entonces nos gustaría conocer como primer punto cuál es la opinión que tiene el doctor Pinar respecto a esta situación.
Unfortunately, especially in many countries, teacher preparation is focused on the how question. That is, how I should teach. Um, and on the acquisition of appropriate professional values, like caring, for example. And I'm not disputing that, but at the same time, it ignores the kind of most recent, the most recent thinking in the subjects which this plan reports and articulates. Um, um, the one rub, one difficulty is that the project of education, in my view at least, requires some independence of thought and some relative autonomy. And that means that as educators, we're not all doing the same thing. We're not all thinking the same thing. That's clear to you at the university. But then, in so many countries, there's this insistence that the teachers simply do what they're told. And even if it's progressive, and even some of us on the left who pretend to be progressive and who are progressive, nonetheless become somewhat autocratic when when the teachers don't conform to our progressive point of view. So the trouble with teacher education being a solution, it seems to me it's an opportunity to confront and reflect on and think about all of these various issues, not necessarily to accept uncritically what the ministry has proposed, but to engage with it and to be aware of the importance of the issues that it raises. For me, you asked about the autobiography. The project of the method of Carrere and autobiographical research and education is the project of self-understanding. Not that it's final and complete and ever reached, but it's always provisional and momentary and ongoing. And self-understanding enables one to be more psychologically free in a way. You know, for example, what your influences are, what has determined your thinking. And you may coincide, you may wish to affirm the way you've been formed, your intellectual formation. But you also may wish to intervene in it, and especially in light of new information, hence the importance of study. And the autobiographical research emphasizes the psychological complexity and difficulty of grappling with new information, new knowledge that could be in contradiction with some of one's childhood beliefs, especially for young people, could be in contradiction to one's political ideology. It becomes an opportunity to study privately one's own thinking life, one's own feeling life, one's own teaching experience, and an experience of study. As you know, educators' daily life in schools is such a maelstrom. It's like a hurricane in a way. No matter how much control and order is exerted, there's always ferment. There's always change and issues and difficulties, especially when class size is too large. And teachers don't have sufficient time to work through psychologically their own experience of being there every day for children. So hence the importance of autobiography.
The teacher asks the students to write an autobiography about their interests, especially trying to be careful not to touch personal or traumatical stuff. Neil has insisted on that many times. And then, according to 4 or 5 questions, and the the autobiography of teacher himself, herself, And the guidelines that the set on Ministry of Education states, it comes out a Currere said that the Bildung, the self-formation, la autoformación, is very important for teachers.
Well, for me, the first point to make is that when my conception of study is not the same as cramming for an exam, staying up all night because you haven't read anything before. No, I'm thinking of study as a free play of following your interest and following your curiosity. So it's not learning preordained material. It's discovering what it is, the next step in your own understanding of whatever it is that you're studying. So it becomes an exercise in your own autonomy, if you will. It becomes an exercise in discovering and reformulating what your interest is and how you're thinking and how you might intervene in your thinking so that it alters in ways that you deem appropriate at the moment. There's much talk, the metaphor of journey, of course, is an old one in education. But study can be like a journey in the sense of not only learning new material, but becoming new material. There's a reciprocity between subjectivity and cognition and emotion. And so study for me becomes central, really the core concept in education, and teaching secondary, important, albeit important. Frida mentioned about the very technical training, and for me, it's I embrace just the opposite. That is, the teacher as an agent of improvisation. Ted Aoki, the Canadian theorist, used the metaphor of jazz music. It requires a certain technical expertise, of course, but the jazz quartet or whatever jazz band is playing, it unfolds in the moment, and it's in dialogue with each other, and there are riffs on other themes, and so to think of teaching as a jazz player, albeit the most important player, the teacher is, but nonetheless playing with what is said and discussed and explained in classrooms. So yes, improvisation. Frida, in fact, I think to the extent that we become like each other, the teachers can be replaced by robots or AI. It's only our distinctive experience and individuality that enables us to address specific individual students in the class, attuned to them, even beyond, underneath what they say or what they appear. As a parent, you do that, right? But you're sensitively attuned to what the child is saying and what your own idea is. You don't necessarily, you obviously can't attend to the school children with the same extent because they're not your children. They're other people's children, but nonetheless, and they're in a group, but still, nonetheless, I think the gift that we educators offer is being present to the children and responding in distinctive ways, which is the opposite of technical. It requires us to be to improvise.
In your point of view, what are the most important challenges faced by the educational reforms?
Well, you mentioned,
and in Mexico, of course, particularly.
Well, you mentioned one earlier. That is the disinclination of many teachers to engage with reform. Additionally, I would say the problem with reform is, first of all, that it's top down, that it's dictated by a central agency, and that it structurally constrains the intellectual independence and the professional autonomy of educators. Now, I understand that's the point of reform is to change how teachers teach. But over the years, especially in the U.S., it has inculcated a sense of cynicism, a kind of obstinate refusal to engage in the reform. The joke in the U.S. is that reforms are like taxi cabs. If you miss one, don't worry, there'll be another one soon enough. So it undermines the ground. The challenge in Mexico, well, you know so much more than I do. This statement is inspiring. The study plan 2022. It's an inspiring statement. I have my issues with it, but it's something to be studied. And I think to the extent that it could be taught and criticized and debated and discussed, it keeps alive the ideas that it raises, which are really fundamental to not only a fourth transformation of Mexico, but the new Mexico that's emerging, quite independent of its politicians. The challenges in other countries is that it's often tied to economic agendas and political agendas. But the trouble is that reforms are so above the ground where the educators are working that it's often experienced as a kind of a bomb dropping from the air. The process of change in the schools, as it is in the universities, is slower than politicians want. It's partly generational. It's partly the locale. It's partly what the work that we university professors of education do in emphasizing different aspects. But I should think Mexican educators, whatever their response to the study plan, should be proud that it's such a thoughtful and sophisticated statement. They may not agree. They may be unwilling to change how they teach. They may think it's too lofty, but it's something to be proud of that was composed. It bespeaks the sophistication and promise of education in Mexico. Yes, I agree. The students are not well, they're presumably the focus, but as you're pointing out, they're rarely consulted.
Frida Díaz-Barriga and César Cole are coordinating a book on curriculum policies in Iberoamerica, not just only in Latin America. Yes. It's going to be a seminal book that you are going to
introduce.
Give the forward, right?
Nos permitimos cerrar esta interesante entrevista simplemente agradeciendo al doctor Pinar su presencia, por supuesto al doctor José María García Garduño por estarnos acompañando en la misma, y tal vez cerramos con esta cita que nos parece sintetiza mucho de las ideas que el doctor Pinar ha planteado en este espacio. Él nos dice, solo a través de la reconstrucción subjetiva del individuo podrá darse el cambio o reconstrucción social. Muchísimas gracias.